Based on the cards we've already seen, the upcoming Pokemon TCG set, Paradox Rift, looks absolutely phenomenal. And with this new round of cards, the set just got even better. I'm Jet from InThirdPerson.com. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and let's look at the latest cards coming soon in Paradox Rift. Jirachi has a phenomenal ability, Stellar Veil. Attacks from your opponent's basic Pokemon can't put damage counters on your benched Pokemon. Keep in mind, there's a difference between damage and damage counters. Greninja, Radiant Greninja, drops damage, and Sableye drops damage counters. We haven't had anything to block damage counters in, I don't know if there ever has been. I think there has, but at least not in the time I've been playing the game. So having an option to shut down damage counters from basic Pokemon is huge. And some of the big cards that get shut down, I mean, there's really one big card that gets shut down, and it's Sableye. Lost Box decks have been going absolutely insane for the past year with Sableye and Lost Mine just dropping damage counters on a whole bunch of Pokemon wherever they want with no way of blocking them. And this card has been such a problem in the game because there are so many decks that get punished for putting down small Pokemon, basic Pokemon, whether you are playing a single prize deck or even an evolution deck, EX deck, where you're playing like Terra Charizard EX and Sableye comes in and snipes down 2 Charmanders. And having protection against that type of attack is amazing. And ting-lu EX, I know this is not... ting-lu is not as meta relevant as a Lost Box, but its Land Scoop attack does drop damage counters, and Jirachi's going to be able to block that, which is annoying as someone who loves ting-lu, but for the overall health of the game, having something to stop Sableye is absolutely amazing. However, Jirachi is not perfect. It blocks damage counters, but it doesn't stop these particular attacks, such as Radiant Greninja's Moonlight Shuriken, because that is damage and not damage counters. Again, those are two different things, and you're going to still need Manaphy in order to block damage specifically. Cresselia doesn't get stopped. Yes, it is a basic Pokemon. However, the wording on Moonglow Reverse makes it different than what Jirachi can stop, because Moonglow Reverse moves damage counters. It doesn't put damage counters, and therefore Jirachi doesn't stop that. And then there's other attackers such as Meowscarada EX and Inteleon VMAX. These are evolution Pokemon, and therefore Jirachi doesn't stop their snipe attacks either. It does beg the question, how much bench space are you going to dedicate towards these sort of counter Pokemon? AzulGG put out this tweet the other day of all of the bench counters that we currently have, right? The Jirachi blocking damage counters, the Solrock Lunatone making it so that you can prevent the effects of stadiums affecting you, Manaphy to block damage to the bench, and Spiritomb to shut down basic Pokemon V. Like, at the very least, in the Jirachi's case, are you benching Jirachi and Manaphy in order to block damage and damage counters? In certain deck archetypes, yeah, you're going to do it, but 2 bench spots is a lot to dedicate to that type of defense, and I'm not sure every deck is going to want to do that. That being said, with Sableye being such a menace to the game, that this might be the way we play going forward. Iron Hands EX is a future Pokemon. It's got 2 moves, 2 lightning and a colorless. Arm Press does 160 damage. It's okay, I guess, but its other move is very intriguing. For 1 lightning, 3 colorless, Strength Amplifier does 120 damage, and if your opponent's active Pokemon is knocked out by damage from this attack, take 1 additional prize card. This is very intriguing, right? Being able to knock out a Comfey and take 2 prizes. We've seen this with Stoutland V, and how good that can be. If you hit Mew V Max with this, you're taking 4 prizes, which is absolutely phenomenal. And 4 energy is a lot, but we're playing a lightning deck, and lightning decks right now have a lot of resources to get that energy on, such as Flaffy, which I know is rotating in the next rotation, but being able to accelerate discarded energy onto your Iron Hands is going to help cover that cost. We also have Electric Generator, which lets us look at the top 5 cards of our deck and attach up to 2 basic lightning energy we find there onto our benched Pokemon. So getting the energy onto Iron Hands actually isn't that bad. And on top of that, we have a new Future Booster energy capsule. Again, we saw part of this card the other day in a Iron Valiant box, but it was kind of obstructed. Now we have a good look at the card, and it helps out Iron Hands and all future Pokemon because it's got the, when you attach this, the future Pokemon this card is attached to has no retreat cost, and the attack it uses does 20 more damage to your opponent's active Pokemon before weakness and resistance. So Iron Hands is only doing, or is now doing 140 damage, which is even better than 120, like of course plus 20, making the KOs a little more realistic. And then on top of that, having no retreat cost, let's go back a couple slides here. And yeah, Iron Hands is a beefy Pokemon at 4 retreat, but if you've got this tool attached, it's 0, and now you've got a 230 HP free retreater that can also knock out Pokemon for extra prizes. That's amazing. Future Jet here, sorry for the weird edit, but we got a new round of cards that I think we have to talk about for the purposes of today's video. I don't always get the opportunity to update these videos, so they're like right up to the minute with all the latest cards. I try to, but in this instance, I think it's worth taking the effort to last minute punch these in because there are some big ramifications to the game, including these TM tools, which actually is the big one here. So let's start. Technical Machine Evolution. Again, TMs are coming back to the game. The way these work, these are tool cards, but once you use them, you have to discard them. So these are one-shot tools. I guess you could have 4 of them in your deck if you really wanted to, but you have to discard it after each use. So this one, Evolution. This one, you put it onto your active Pokemon, and you get to choose up to 2 of your bench Pokemon. Search your deck for a card that evolves from each of those Pokemon and put those cards onto them to evolve them. Then shuffle your deck. This is an amazing card for setup. Like you've got, say, your Charmanders on the bench, and then you don't have to worry about rare candy necessarily. You just throw this onto, I don't know, a Pidgey or a Bidoof or even Cleffa or something like that. I guess you don't want to use Cleffa. You probably still want to draw 7 cards. Regardless, whatever's in the active, you throw an energy on there, and then you get the Charmeleons on the board so that you just have to evolve up. You don't have to worry about rare candy next turn. Awesome. Really like this card. But then we have Technical Machine Devolution, and this card is a spiritual successor to a card that we saw back in the game a long time ago, and this one has the inverse effect. Actually, this is kind of worse, bad for the person on the receiving end here. Devolution. Devolve all of your opponent's Pokemon by putting the highest stage evolution card on them into their hand. And this is, I think there are certain decks that aren't going to mind this as much. Like if you're playing against Mew VMAX, you're just going to go back to Mew V, and then you'll probably just evolve back up next turn. However, Stage 2 decks get, well, okay, before we get to the Stage 2 decks, spread decks really benefit here. Something like a Radiant Greninja, Sableye. I know oftentimes they're running the same deck, but, you know, Chien-pao, for example, with Radiant Greninja and the spread damage, or Meowscarada EX, right? You set up a whole bunch of damage on the bench on bulky Stage 2 Pokemon that have very small basics, and then you come in, you devolve them back down to their 60 HP or below Pokemon, and then they just die. And knocked out. And that is a way of getting through really bulky Pokemon in a different way. However, my bigger concern is just Stage 2 decks as a whole. So, for example, you got Charizard EX in through Rare Candy. You evolved it with Charmander, or from Charmander straight to Charizard EX. Your opponent hits you with the Devolution. Now you've got just Charmander on the board, and all of a sudden, like you weren't playing Charmeleon, and maybe you don't have one in the deck because you've been relying so much on Rare Candy because you don't have time for multiple stage evolutions here, and now if you want to get back in the game, all of a sudden you gotta find another rare candy, which is a finite resource. Oftentimes it can be difficult to find that rare candy, or you have to start playing more of your stage 1 Pokemon, your Charmeleons, or I mean, it's not bad for, say, the Gardevoir deck because you're playing a bunch of Raltses anyway, but a lot of stage 2 decks have useless stage 1s that we often cut out or have just the one of in order to use rare candy and get rolling in 2 turns versus 3. And this card really hurts those decks that are using rare candy, which is the best thing you can have in a stage 2 deck. Now, I think going forward, if we're going to try and counter this, the Evolution card could help. Playing more of the stage 1s could be a way of mitigating this, but I think there are some arguments to be had about this making stage 2 decks worse, and for a long time stage 2 decks have been really bad, and we're getting to a point now where stage 2 decks are finally starting to become more viable and playable, and the balance of the game, where the idea is like if you're playing a basic deck, they go fast, but maybe they aren't as strong as the fully evolved decks, which are incredibly strong, but they're hard to set up. And oftentimes the game has favored the basics or the stage 1 decks, but now stage 2s are starting to get better finally, and then a card like this Devolution card comes up and potentially makes stage 2s bad again. And I do have some concerns. I don't know enough about the game to be able to say this is game breaking or completely destroys stage 2 decks, but I do have some concerns about the overall health of the game and stage 2 decks if this is as scary as I think it could be. We also got a new round of Treasures of Ruin cards. So this is Wo-Chen, Chi-Yu, Chien-Pao, and Ting-Lu. We last saw them as EX cards in Paldea Evolved, and now they've got basic Pokemon here, and they all have the same first attack, lets you attach 2 basic energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. All of these are basics that are, 130, 140 HP. I guess Chi-Yu is really bad at like 110. You're probably going to get destroyed on the following turn, so this attaching the energy isn't particularly helpful. But the moves do vary in their effectiveness here. Greedy Bind sounds really cool. 3 grass and a colorless. You do 140 damage, and during your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon's attacks cost 2 colorless more. I'm sure people are going to play around with this. This is very intriguing. A lot of decks can't really attack if you have to increase their attacks by 2. But if they can just retreat into another attacker, or they have other ways of accelerating energy, like if you did this to Arceus V-Star and they can just go and hard retreat into whatever the attacker they had on the bench, or switch it out or gust around it, like whatever the case may be, I think this is going to be really hard to set up and not the most effective attack here, or most useful attack out of the ones in this Treasure of Ruin set. Chi-Yu has the move Jealous Fire for 2 fire energy. You do 50 damage, and if any of your own Pokemon were knocked out by damage from an attack during your opponent's last turn, this attack does 90 more damage. So you've got a single prizer. Yeah, 110 HP is really bad, but for 2 energy, you can get the second energy on there with Magma Basin, and then you've got a single prize attacker doing 140 damage. That's enough to take out a lot of single prize and stage 1 non-rule box Pokemon, of which there are several in the game right now. And this is a way of making sure your Charizard or your Entei or whatever fire main attacker is, like, keep them out of harm's way, and you still get a prize and can maybe even uptrade with something like this. So I kind of like this one. Chien-Pao, very popular from Paldea Evolved. Chien-Pao EX is still a very good card, and this one just kind of slots right into the Chien-Pao Baxcalibur deck as is. You've got the move Wrathblade. It's kind of a worse version of Hailblade, 2 water and a colorless. You do 130 damage and you discard 2 energy from this Pokemon, but you can get this rolling very quickly with Baxcalibur using pretty much the exact same engine of Baxcalibur attaching energy and then using your energy recovery cards to get the energy back so you can reload them. And kind of like the Chi-Yu example, you can use this Chien-Pao to attack, take out single prizers, and keep out your your chien-pao EX out of harm's way so that you are, you're trading single prize for single prize and you are not getting incremental damage on chien-pao EX and potentially dropping 2 prizes. Ting-lu. This one has a very intriguing attack, Proud Impact for 3 fighting energy, 220 damage. If this Pokemon has 4 more damage counters on it, this attack does nothing. I mean, yes, spread decks could probably punish this, but for the most part, you're probably coming in. If you can get the energy on, you're swinging for 220, which is the magic number for taking out a number of basic Pokemon EXs, Pokemon V, and you're hitting Arceus for weakness and you're knocking that out. So if you can get this rolling, it's not bad. You could use something like a Koraidon, you could use Gutsy Pickaxe, you could use Sandy Shocks with Energy Switch, Raihan perhaps. I don't know, it still feels like a bit too much. Like, fighting energy is such a hard commodity to come by that building it up for one swing at 220, knowing that this is going to get knocked out on the next turn, feels a little too expensive, but hitting for 220 is very nice. All right, let's get back to the rest of this video. Sandy Shocks EX has the ability Magnetic Attraction. This ability can be used once during your turn. If your opponent has 4 or fewer prize cards remaining, you get to attach a basic fighting energy from your discard pile to this Pokemon, which is, it's okay, right? Being able to build up energy, either energy acceleration for itself, or if you're using Energy Switch to move it to somewhere else. Fighting types are notorious for having bad energy acceleration, so being able to charge itself up or potentially be a secondary energy acceleration for something else, it's kind of cool, it's okay. And its attack, Ground Spark, for 2 fighting and a colorless, 200 damage, and this Pokemon can't attack during your next turn. If you really want to get around that restriction, you can just pivot in and out of the active. I don't necessarily think it's worth it for 200 damage, though. That's a little low relative to where you want it to be. However, you are charging it up a little bit. There's another supporter card that we'll talk about in a little bit that does help make Sandy Shocks and any sort of ancient Pokemon accelerate a little faster. But I think this card is just okay. I'm not in love with its damage, the acceleration, and having to bench it preemptively in order to, get that energy on. I guess you can bench it before then, but I'm not in love with this card. I think it looks fine. Iron Jugulus is a future Pokemon with 2 attacks. First one for 3 colorless, Homing Heads. This attack does 50 damage to 3 of your opponent's Pokemon that already have damage counters on them. And its Baryon Beam does 150 damage for 5 colorless energy. That's a lot. If this Pokemon has a future boost energy capsule attached, this attack costs 3 colorless instead. Now, I don't think there's much use for Baryon Beam. Like, I wouldn't do for 3 colorless for 150 feels too much. However, the Homing Heads attack for 3 colorless energy does seem kind of intriguing to me. It does have some challenges for sure, but you theoretically could take multiple KOs in one go. I think especially if you've got the future booster already attached, you could be hitting, say, like you're playing a Lost Box deck and they've got 3 Comfeys on the board, for example. You hit the active for 70, you knock out that first Comfey, and if you were able to get 20 damage on 2 other Comfeys beforehand, whether it is Halucha or something else, you could knock out all 3 in one go. It's an unlikely wombo combo, but it is a combo that is theoretically possible, and it makes me not want to write off Iron Jugulus right away. Aegislash has the ability Sacred Shield. Prevent all damage done to this Pokemon by attacks from your opponent's Pokemon EX and Pokemon V. If this sounds familiar, it should, because Mimikyu from Paldea Evolved already has this ability, and it's a basic, so why would you want to play a Stage 2 instead? Well, for example, its Hard Bash attack does 120 damage, which is better than the 7 damage counters from Mimikyu, and this attack's damage isn't affected by effects on your opponent's active Pokemon, so 120 Shred is, it's not bad, right? Is it still enough for me to play this over Mimikyu? I don't know, but there's another theoretical possibility here with the Gorgeous Mantle card. Now, by the time this gets revealed in English, it might have a different name. The translation we have right now is Gorgeous Mantle, where this gives Aegislash plus 100 HP, 250 total, and this is for all non-rule box Pokemon can use this card. You get plus 100 HP, and this boosts Gorgeous Mantle, or boosts Aegislash by a lot, but it makes Aegislash drop 2 prizes when knocked out. That being said, 250 HP, that's going to be really hard for most non-rule box Pokemon to knock out, and you're already blocking Pokemon V EX and Pokemon V. So this could end up being like a weirdly effective tank if you can get it set up. I don't know, just something to think about. Professor Sada's determination allows you to choose up to 2 of your ancient Pokemon and attach 1 basic energy from your discard pile to each of them, then draw 3 cards. There are a lot of cards in the game right now that have some sort of effect plus draw 3. Worker lets you discard a stadium and draw 3. Avery is draw 3 and force your opponent's bench down to 3 Pokemon, and this is another one of those cards, but this one's pretty solid, especially if you're playing an ancient deck. I really like that you're getting extra energy acceleration here and you're drawing 3 cards. Really nice. Professor Turo's Scenario is a very intriguing card. It just says put 1 of your Pokemon into your hand and you have to discard all cards attached to that Pokemon. It is a scoop card, but a universal scoop card. And I think there are some very interesting scenarios here, like one of your Pokemon gets damaged and you can just get rid of it, right? You just take it off the board, you put it back in your hand. You have to discard stuff, which makes it not as useful. But if you can carry on the battle without having that liability on the board, that is pretty sick. Right? So for example, some other scoop cards we've seen in the past, Scoop Up Cyclone, which lets you put 1 of your Pokemon and all cards attached to it into your hand. We've seen this as an ace spec. I wonder with the release of this Professor Turo Scenario, if we end up not getting Scoop Up Cyclone back. I know Scoop Up Cyclone is better, but this is a more universal option. You can have multiple copies of it, and maybe they say that's just good enough. So Scoop Up Cyclone, one of the previous examples of a scoop card that is kind of like this Professor Turo Scenario. Scoop Up Net was one of the most game-defining cards from the Sword and Shield era. Let you scoop up a non-rule box Pokemon. I mean, anything but a Pokemon V or a GX. This is an absolutely busted card. And in Expanded, technically this works with EX cards as well. So I wonder if this card is terrorizing Expanded still with the new EXs. That would be nuts. We also have Penny, which lets you scoop up all of the cards, including anything attached, and you put it into your hand, but this only works on basics. If you're playing a basic deck, this is probably the better way to go. And then we also have Sharon's Care, but this only works on colorless Pokemon that have damage counters on them. So yeah, Professor Turo Scenario, a little more of a universal option. You do have to discard cards, but there are scenarios where, yeah, you'll want to play this to get a damaged Pokemon off the board or take out a liability such as something like a Lumineon or a Squawkabilly could be taken out. Some might argue playing Collapse Stadium might be the better way to do that, because you don't have to burn your supporter for that, but I do think this is an intriguing option nevertheless. Techno Radar, you got to discard a card to use this. However, you get to search your deck for up to 2 future Pokemon cards, reveal them and put them into your hand, then shuffle your deck. It kind of feels like a mix of Quick Ball and Battle VIP Pass. You have to discard a card, but you get 2 Pokemon and you just get to put them into your hand, which is amazing. And this only works on future Pokemon, so this is a very specific tech for that subset of decks, but it is very nice. Being able to get 2 Pokemon in one shot is incredible. I don't necessarily... It might be a hard replacement for Nest Ball in those decks. I think that being able to discard 1 card most of the time is going to be fine. I would rather do that to get my board set up, which is good. It also works at any point in the game, unlike Battle VIP Pass, which only works on the first turn. And last but not least, Battle VIP Pass is going away in the next rotation, and this new card is going to stick around for years to come. Mela is a intriguing option, particularly for fire decks, though it doesn't necessarily have to be for fire decks. You can only play this when your Pokemon on the previous turn get knocked out during the last turn. You do get to attach a basic fire energy from your discard pile to one of your Pokemon. It doesn't specify active or bench. It doesn't specify fire Pokemon, so it can be any Pokemon you want, one fire energy. And if you do this, you can draw cards until you have 6 in your hand. This is not quite Raihan in the sense that you can't attach any energy, and you can't cherry pick the card you want. But for fire decks, being able to attach energy from the discard pile to any of your Pokemon, that's great. And sometimes you just need more than one card. And Raihan only gets you 1. Mela can get you up to 6. And that might be getting the multiple pieces you need in order to get that game-winning combo or whatever it might be going. And I think this is a good card. Tulip lets you put up to 4 in any combination of Pokemon and basic psychic energy cards from your discard pile into your hand. We have seen this effect before from... It's Nessa, basically, from Vivid Voltage, except it is a psychic type versus Nessa, which was water. And I think the obvious partner here is the Xatu that is coming out as part of Paradox Rift. And Xatu, of course, has the ability that lets you attach an energy and draw 2 cards, and you can grab a whole bunch of energy from your discard pile with Tulip here and get rolling that way. And Shadow Rider Calyrex, while it is still standard legal, will also benefit from this card. I think there are arguments to be made. Maybe superior energy retrieval is the way to go if you just want energy. But if you also need a combination of Pokemon, then Tulip is great for getting whatever mix of psychic Pokemon and energy that you need. Slither Wing is a ancient Pokemon. It's got the attack trample for 1 fighting energy. Discard 1 card from the top of your opponent's deck. You're not really playing this for mill. However, its attack Billowing Burn for 2 fighting energy does 120 damage, and this Pokemon does 90 damage to itself, and your opponent's active Pokemon is now burned. 120 for 2 is not necessarily great. However, and with the burn, eventually that's going to be 140. I guess that's not bad. What you really want this for is KOing very specific things. Like if you get to hit Miraidon or Raikou or Raichu or Arceus V, all of those can get one-shotted by Slither Wing. And if you're willing to play Choice Belt, you could one-shot Arceus V Star, combine this with any sort of other fighting acceleration or ancient acceleration like the Professor Sada card that we saw earlier, or Gutsy Pickaxe here. You could potentially get a turn 1 donk on those Pokemon and take 2 prizes and uptrade that way. Otherwise, I think this card is just but because of the popularity of Miraidon and Arceus, maybe this has more value than I initially think. Medical Energy. As long as this card is attached to a Pokemon, it's a colorless energy, and this lets you heal 30 damage off of the Pokemon this is attached to. It's fine. It's fine. I don't know if 30 damage is really enough for most decks, but there are a couple of decks that could run this. I think like Lugia could run this, for example, because you're going to be accelerating a ton of special energy anyway, but you're not going to get the effect if you accelerate through Archeops. But maybe it's other attackers like a Tyranitar, you could heal a little bit and continue to swing that way. I don't know. I think this is fine, but it's not going to be earth-shattering or anything like that. That does it for this wrap-up, but whew, that was a lot of cards to cover. Thank you for sticking with me all the way to the end of this video, and I hope you're excited for Paradox Rift as much as I am. But for now, I gotta get going. Thank you so much for watching. You can find me on all the things: YouTube, TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at In3rdPerson. You can find me on Twitch at In3rdPerson, where I stream the Pokemon trading card game every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And check out the website, in3rdperson.com, for more articles and videos on video games, board games, and other nerdy pursuits. So until the next one, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.